She never realized that a single comment at the Grammys would set off a chain reaction that circled back to her own front gate. What began as praise quickly flipped into backlash when Bill Maher publicly challenged her, telling her to surrender the land or stop talking altogether. This was never about one line or one moment. It became about a lock, a home, a gate, and a confrontation no one in Hollywood had been willing to voice out loud. Now, Billie Eilish has finally responded. Before unpacking what she said and how she said it, it's important to understand just how fast everything unraveled. This wasn't a slow build. The pressure exploded all at once because there was no gradual release.
Here because this is stolen land, Billie, and we think we should be given access to your quite lovely $3 million mansion.
That was the trigger. A Grammy stage, a microphone, and music combined to deliver a message with real force, delivered in a room packed with celebrities nodding along in agreement. On stolen land, no one is illegal. The response was immediate, loud applause. For more than 3 hours, the room echoed with clapping, standing ovations, and the kind of shared approval that turns a statement into something unquestioned. Then the internet did what it always does. Every sentence, the house, and the gates were pulled into focus. Once the conversation shifted from immigration to ownership, the applause started to sound different. The message suddenly pointed back at its source. Within hours, clips were stitched together side by side. After Billie Eilish's passionate, morally confident moment on the Grammy Award stage, aerial footage of her Los Angeles home began circulating. Large security cameras, tall fencing, and steel gates that only opened by invitation. Then came the unavoidable question. If everyone else's land is up for debate, what about yours? It could have stayed a short-lived argument, a weekend meme, or a passing online joke. But then Bill Maher stepped in. He didn't soften the point or talk around it. He went straight to the core of the issue. And he did it from inside the same cultural world, not from the political fringe or an outside critic. That's what made it different. And that's why it carried real risk.
A new rule memo to Democrats: if you ever want to win an election again, the absolute most important first step is stop doing this.
No one is illegal on stolen land.
Yeah, I don't know if we're still saying cringe.
Everything shifted once he stepped in. This was no longer about left versus right. It became a question of performance versus follow through. Either give the land back or stop acting like your words carry weight, he said. And that was the moment everything changed. Because now it wasn't just online critics stirring noise. A Grammy-winning pop star was being confronted by a seasoned political commentator and asked to stand fully behind her own message. At the same time, the poetic idea of stolen land lost its abstract tone. It became concrete. Cameras appeared outside her home. Reporters didn't cross lines or break laws. They didn't climb fences or trespass. They stood outside and let the images speak. The gates, the locks, the security, the music tied to a very real piece of private property. The contrast did all the work. There was no chaos and no intimidation, just a visual comparison. On stage, boundaries don't matter. At home, they matter completely. That image lingered, and it wouldn't let go. This was the moment no one saw coming. Billie Eilish didn't respond right away. Instead, there was silence. Total silence. No quick story post, no defensive tweet, no carefully worded statement, nothing. Reports suggested her team spent days telling media outlets that she wouldn't make false claims, but the quiet didn't calm anything down. It made the situation more intense. With every hour that passed, critics treated the lack of response as proof. The debate widened. Native activists weighed in, some arguing that land acknowledgements mean little without real action. Others pushed back, saying it was unfair and overly simple to place centuries of history on one pop star. Conservative lawmakers voiced their views. Liberal commentators pushed back just as hard. Behind closed doors, Hollywood insiders grew uneasy, because if audiences kept thinking this way, if they started demanding that celebrity statements line up with celebrity lifestyles, award shows themselves would feel different. And then things grew even more complicated. Quiet conversations started behind the scenes. According to industry sources, Billie was surprised by how literally her words were taken. She hadn't fully considered how language commonly used in activist spaces would collide with Bill Maher's challenge, property law, and the optics of wealth. Reports say her management discussed 3 possible paths forward: stay silent until the moment fades, release a written explanation, or address it head-on in an interview. At first, they chose to say nothing, but then something shifted. Politics wasn't what pushed this forward. Perception was. Once the video spread everywhere, another layer became impossible to ignore. The response wasn't driven only by criticism, it was fueled by resentment. Anger toward gated neighborhoods, elites, and the unspoken divide aimed at people with inherited wealth, who live behind keypads and cameras while speaking about borders in absolute terms. Whether she wanted it or not, Billie Eilish became a symbol of that tension. Then came reports of a quiet, private meeting. Entertainment insiders claimed Billie sat down with close friends and asked a simple question: did I say something wrong? That's when the internal split reportedly surfaced. Some advisors pushed back, arguing the phrase she used was common in activist circles, morally aligned and meant to be symbolic. Others disagreed, saying she had oversimplified something far too complex. History, they argued, can't be reduced to a slogan. So, she took an unexpected step. Instead of issuing a statement, stepping onto a stage, or firing off a post, she agreed to speak in a controlled interview setting, free from noise and distractions. When the clip dropped, people paid attention. She didn't apologize. She didn't retreat either. She adjusted the lens. According to reports, she explained that her words were never meant to attack modern property systems or encourage real-world trespassing. The intention, she said, was to express empathy for marginalized communities and to acknowledge historical wrongs. That's when the discussion changed. Rather than attacking her critics, she addressed the consistency question directly. She acknowledged that today's legal systems are built on layered and complicated histories, and within those systems, property ownership does exist. Supporting indigenous rights, she explained, doesn't mean giving up your home. It means advocacy, backing policy change, and helping redirect resources where they're needed. It wasn't heated. It wasn't aggressive. It was measured. And that was new. That restraint immediately split reactions all over again. Some said she had shifted course. Others argued she was simply clarifying herself. A few accused her of being carefully guided behind the scenes, while others saw growth and composure. But subtlety doesn't travel far online. Conflict does. So the headlines took over. Billie backs down. Maher wins. Hollywood gets the message. Yet she never mentioned Bill Maher by name. Saying it would have kept the story alive. Leaving it unsaid allowed it to shrink. Still, something far more important was happening beneath the surface, and hardly anyone noticed. Behind the scenes, the ripple effect was real. Several celebrities reportedly removed references to stolen land from their planned award show remarks. Land acknowledgements appeared less often. Publicists began reviewing activist language with sharper eyes. In other words, a quiet reset was underway, whether Billie Eilish meant to spark it or not. At that point, this was no longer about immigration. It wasn't limited to indigenous history. And it wasn't really about Maher anymore. The focus shifted to something bigger, whether audiences are growing tired of the gap between how celebrities live and what they say on stage. For years, speeches floated above everyday reality. Now, they're being pulled back toward the driveway. And when Billie finally spoke, she didn't unravel. She didn't lash out. She adjusted. Some see that kind of public adjustment as progress. Others see it as retreat. Whether she regrets the original remark isn't the real issue anymore. The real question is this: will she or anyone else make the same kind of statement again without first thinking about how words collide with the physical world they live in? Because once a gate turns into a symbol, there's no hiding it. Metaphors stop working the moment someone publicly demands that you give the land back. And this story doesn't stop here. It keeps shifting. After Bill Maher launched his sharp challenge over stolen land, Billie Eilish responded, and a new phase began. What people rarely mention is that public outrage is only half of how these moments unfold in Hollywood. The real anxiety happens in private group chats. Behind the velvet ropes of celebrity culture, something quietly changed when Billie finally addressed the idea of stolen land. The moment wasn't loud or explosive, but it was focused. And that kind of precision keeps publicists awake at night. Because if one gated driveway becomes symbolic, then every gated driveway in Los Angeles starts to feel exposed. The conversation didn't stop after her remarks. It shifted tone. She clarified. She adjusted the framing. She softened the sharp corners. For her, intention mattered more than literal reading. She talked about awareness of systems, unity, policy change, and support for indigenous communities. She described the phrase as moral shorthand, not a statement about ownership. But that's where the internet complicates things. Explaining a popular phrase doesn't make it disappear. Every sentence of her response was picked apart. People analyzed posture, tone, and even pauses. Some viewers thought she looked calm and thoughtful. Others felt she seemed boxed in. A few argued the media twisted her words. Some even claimed the moment proved Maher had won. But keeping score was never the point. Strategically, this may have been the smartest way for her to handle the pressure without making the situation bigger. Imagine the alternative. If she had pushed back harder, mocked the challenge, accused critics of hypocrisy, or dared them to show up at her gate, the cycle would have dragged on for weeks. Instead, she chose adjustment over escalation, and that choice quietly reshaped the conversation. Hollywood paid attention when she chose restraint instead of resistance. Sources close to award show productions say scripts for upcoming events were quietly adjusted. References to historical injustice were handled with more care. Legal language began influencing how activist slogans were reviewed, not because the industry suddenly rejected those messages, but because the gate had changed the stakes. In the wake of Billie's moment, presenters were reportedly warned to avoid sweeping claims that could be taken at face value. Meanwhile, Bill Maher stayed true to form. He didn't back off. On a later episode, he returned to the topic briefly. Sharp, persistent, just enough to signal that the issue wasn't settled. The point, as he framed it, remained the same. Moral statements carry weight only when they align with lived reality. This is where the situation became more layered. Instead of pushing Billie Eilish into another public exchange, her team reportedly shifted into what insiders call containment mode. No late-night jabs, no indirect posts, no counter-arguments. Silence, when used carefully, can drain momentum. By refusing to name Maher, she avoided turning the debate into a personal showdown. But restraint doesn't thrive online. Escalation does. Fan groups split quickly. To some, Billie was a young artist unfairly targeted by an older commentator known for provoking controversy. To others, popularity didn't excuse inconsistency. Fame, they argued, doesn't cancel accountability. Then, something unexpected happened. Several indigenous supporters of Billie redirected the conversation entirely. Instead of demanding that celebrities abandon their homes for symbolic purity, they emphasized what land-back movements actually focus on: resource sovereignty, treaty rights, and policy change. That shift mattered. Calls for dramatic gestures faded. The tone softened again. The argument was reframed. And with that change in structure, the spectacle lost its fuel. The outrage didn't explode, it thinned out. Not because the issue disappeared, but because nuance finally took center stage. Outrage fades when spectacle disappears. But that led to an unexpected result no one saw coming. Over time, Billie Eilish's public image shifted. Before this moment, she was often portrayed as bold, immovable, and unwilling to soften her stance. Afterward, she appeared more careful, more aware that words don't stay confined to the room where they're spoken. They travel. And in Hollywood, that awareness marks a real change, because anger can either push a career forward or tear it apart. Some critics argued she should have offered a direct apology. Others warned that apologizing would only create new problems. Instead, she chose a middle path. She stayed grounded. That approach sounds simple, but it's harder than it looks. Behind the scenes, brand partners reportedly watched closely. No deals were canceled, no endorsements disappeared, risk assessments were updated, but nothing was pulled from public view. The message was clear. Even symbolic language can carry serious consequences now. Public relations teams are already absorbing that lesson. Not silence, but precision. Eventually, reporters moved on. The house, the gates, the now famous driveway faded from daily headlines. The video slowed its spread. Still, the image never vanished completely. It remains archived in the internet's long memory, which is why this story keeps resurfacing. Not because Hollywood collapsed, not because Billie lost her home, and not because Bill Maher somehow defeated her. It lingers because one statement exposed a gap between language and lived reality. And those cracks don't disappear, they settle. Here's the part that often gets missed. Billie didn't invent the phrase that caused the uproar. She didn't create the tension between wealth and moral action. She happened to stand on a cultural pressure point at a moment when audiences were already questioning symbolic gestures. Economic stress plays a role. Housing feels out of reach for many people. Enormous celebrity wealth can feel disconnected from everyday life. So when someone with a multi-million-dollar home speaks about borders in abstract moral terms, people hear it differently. Not politically, not personally, but practically. That sense of distance, more than any policy debate, fueled the reaction. And distance can be volatile. Now things are settling. There were no lawsuits, no property exchanges, no public standoffs. What remains is something quieter and more complex, a recalibration. Award show speeches will continue. Artists will keep advocating. Phrases like this will still appear. But more people are noticing that moral shorthand may no longer pass without scrutiny. Audiences aren't just listening to speeches anymore. They're checking the driveway too. Billie came through it intact. Changed, perhaps, but not undone. And that may be the clearest signal of all. In a media culture that absorbs mistakes at lightning speed, survival depends on adaptation. She responded. She adjusted the lens. She stayed calm. And then she moved forward. Whether the internet follows her is still an open question. But one thing is certain. The next time a star stands on a glittering stage and delivers sweeping moral claims, they should expect a closed gate and a voice from the sidelines asking them to live by their words. That's the real outcome. Not cancellation. Not chaos. Consequence. The conversation hasn't ended. It's simply become sharper and quieter. And quiet doesn't mean weak.